Welcome to the UNCGD Podcast, episode 4. I'm Andy. I'll be your host as we talk about all things mindset, motivation, and becoming the version of ourselves that we truly want to become. Now, the previous episodes were filled with some practical steps to get you started. Now, today, I'm going to be talking about my own story, things that I went through, and how it ties in to the things I spoke about in the last 3 episodes. This will be my attempt to help conceptualize the previous episode's information by talking about my own story so that you can better understand it and how you can apply it in your own life. I'm going to explain in my own words how certain things compounded, which created the circumstances that I was living in. Now remember, this is going to be my experience, which may be different from yours. However, there's always going to be commonalities underneath that apply to everybody. A very common one that I experience today with people is a lack of self-awareness or even an understanding in it. And when you lack self-awareness, you miss the signals that come up and you miss things that you could recognize and intercept before they take a hold and begin manifesting things in your life. Now, I'm going to be honest. That right there is something that I avoided so much in the beginning. And I wondered why I just kept spiraling further and further and further because I constantly was seeking something outside of me rather than doing the work inside and gaining more self-awareness, more ability to recognize and to be able to spot it, intercept it, to change it. Now, I don't recommend that because it took me bloody too long and I don't want that for you. And I would like to help shorten how long that takes for you by creating this video today. In my experience with having a lack of self-awareness, I really struggled with recognizing the things that made me feel a certain way, especially when I really didn't want to do them, and I avoided them and I procrastinated as heavily as I possibly could. And my procrastination came from because I had no idea how I was going to overcome them, and problems would roll in. I'd see them and go, yeah, holy shit, no thank you, I'm out of here. And I would avoid them as soon as I could. And in the end, rather than facing the problems that I had in my life, I would really work hard. So I had some kind of work ethic, which is nice, but I worked really hard at figuring out my way around it in the sense of avoiding it and not addressing it. Now, I don't recommend that either because it's going to come back and snowball like it did for me and it ended up turning into about $30,000 in debt. And that's not really good when you had no job, because I didn't have a job at that time and you could only imagine the overwhelm when that kicked in. One thing that I always had was high standards for certain things in my life, especially about myself. Now, when it came to things like bills, getting a job done, or needing to do the work it takes to overcome an issue so that I can live the life that I want, that was like an instant trigger for me to no longer have those high standards. So I would just remove that value that I had of always having a high standard of performance and wanting to get things done. When it came to problems, I would just remove that standard and I'd run for the hills. I'd procrastinate in any way I could. I would choose to watch a movie instead. I would do anything but that. I'd figure out a way. I'd tell myself the lie enough so that I just wouldn't have to do it. And if it came to it, I'd even lie to somebody else so that I didn't have to do it. I'd come up with some story. Now, my issue that I faced, and I know this is common because I talk to a lot of people when it comes to this kind of thing, and it's usually when we feel our worst, it's because we have a standard within us that we're not meeting. And the good thing is about that, usually you can always meet that standard by taking action. Here comes that lesson. For as long as I can remember back then, I just was not taking action. And I allowed problems to snowball, even silly little ones, like doing the bloody dishes, and then they become huge and overwhelming. It could be cleaning, it could be paying a bill. Doesn't matter, anything at all, until they snuck up on me and bit me on the butt. Now, because of the lack of action, that lack of action turned into me procrastinating further and then obtaining a victim mindset because I wasn't willing to take the blame for the circumstances and outcomes in my life. Now, this is a massive issue. If you can't take responsibility for your own actions in your life, you're going to probably point your fingers at everywhere else outside of you and at everyone else but you, even though the whole time it's been you creating the circumstances. Now, this is all well and good, and they're usually little small things that I've said here about like cleaning and paying your bills, things like that. However, where did it really fall apart for me? Where I had to learn these lessons, or I had to change. Otherwise, nothing was going to change. The longer I avoided, the longer I didn't do the inner work, the longer I didn't take responsibility for the circumstances in my life, especially because I had control over it, the longer I held off on doing that work, the more of a victim I became in my own mind. I held a victim mindset. Now imagine the clash. I start holding this victim mindset where I thought the world was out for me, and metaphorically speaking, it felt like I had a target on my back and that problems just found my way to the bullseye, and I was overwhelmed. So the clash of the standard that I had set for me with that victim mindset, there was some bad chemistry right there that just didn't work, but I still wasn't willing to admit it back then for some weird reason, because I just didn't want to do the work. I didn't want to put in the effort it took inside to take control and responsibility for my life. And this led to increased feelings of shame, guilt, depression. And I just did not enjoy my day-to-day. What I was doing, what I had achieved, how I thought I was viewed in the eyes of others, the opinions of others, and overall feeling disappointed for my life. And due to the compounding of this feeling, and kept going and going and going, and I'd always maintain the victim mindset and do nothing about it, wondering why it's the same and getting worse, I fell so far into the pain of my avoidance that I couldn't take it anymore, and I was becoming very overwhelmed because I wasn't controlling the controllable. And what do we do when we're trying to escape? We look for anything that gives us instant gratification of feeling, and we look to things that take us away from the pain. So me having my lack of self-awareness and discipline to control my impulses and my actions, I went down the road of drugs, and that just deepened the rabbit hole even further, which was the perfect escape, however only worsened all of the problems, which this leads me into the concept of addiction. And addiction isn't only from substance. It's not only an alcohol thing, smoking. It's not just those things. It's also how you feel and your thoughts. We get addicted to certain stories, our feelings, and our thoughts. Now, I was originally hesitant to talk about all this stuff. However, the lessons that I learned and what I talk about today really come from these hard times in my life. And hence why I want to pass these on, because I know if you're in the spot where you're battling these metaphorical demons in your head and in your body, I know these lessons help because they work for me, and I know they'll work for you. Now, due to the pain that I was feeling back then, and I had found the drugs, I'd found something that took the pain away instantaneously, and I put my focus on something else other than the truth that really needed work. Now, don't look too far into this. In the end, these are concepts that I'm trying to help you with your life and reflecting on, because the concept is the exact same. It's the exact same concept in the sense of if you don't address something and you suppress it, there's a byproduct that occurs. And usually, if you're avoiding, it's not going to be a very good byproduct because you're going to be trying to run away from the truth rather than dealing with it. Now, my addiction really got formed because the drugs took me away from the pain, and I paid attention to that, and then I relied on that. I started to form my own identity, my own self-identity around that escape and the thing that did it for me. So I was constantly seeking that outside of me. I need to just get out of my own head and figure out a way to get away from it all. Now, the problem with that was for me, with my lack of self-awareness and responsibility to change my own life, that only deepened my state and my energy into the negative of avoiding and snowballing this energy within me. Because every time a problem would come up, I would suppress it instantly and just go, screw that. I'm going straight to the thing I know works. And this doesn't have to be drugs for everybody. It could be an activity. Mate, I guarantee there's people that literally just go and they do something to avoid. They'll go on, they'd rather scroll on social media, watch TV, do certain things rather than face the truth. Now, the more that we suppress and bottle up these things, the more that they run rampant, as it did for me. Now, you compound drugs on top of that. Mate, my emotions were all over the shop. I'm not much of a crier, but I tell you what, I cried a lot. And I lost the sense of me. Now, something that I really want to push forward in this video is whether you're doing drugs right now and using them as an escape or whatever it is, could be alcohol, could be anything at all, could be literally any activity that takes you away from the truth of the activities you really should be doing to change your life. What I really want to push forward is when we avoid and constantly don't face the truth. It's like we're waiting for it to be bad. We want it to be so bad we have no choice. But I'm telling you right now, you don't want to get to that point. What you want to do is intercept right now. No longer tolerate that shit. No longer feed those stories. Begin the work it takes to intercept, to no longer avoid. Doesn't matter, like I said, doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be drugs, alcohol, or anything. It could be any of those activities that you know you do that takes you away from the thing that you know you should be doing with your actions to help change your life, so that you no longer have to be a dreamer, you can live the dream. And you wouldn't even have to wait for something terrible to happen, like sickness or some severe injury, or your entire relationship's crumbling. You don't want to get to that point, and you don't have to wait for that. Don't wait. Focus on how you can change it right now and intercept it before something bad happens. That's what I had to do, because it was going to get really bad for me. I was going to lose the people in my life that I love the most. I wasn't going to achieve the goals that I had, and I knew that I wasn't going to hit my standard I knew I had in me and my own potential. And that bothered me a lot. Yeah, I didn't get to change straight away because I did it by myself, and I didn't have someone like me on my case telling me a way forward, encouraging myself, you know what I mean? And that's why I'm here, to help you out. It's why you can't settle. You can't settle for these circumstances and just keep avoiding and putting it off. You have to do the work. When I got into all of my debt and all of the bills came hanging into me because I had ran from them for as long as I can remember, when they all hit, yeah, I was very overwhelmed. When that hit, I pretty much had breakdowns all the time because, number one, I didn't have a job. My partner had all the jobs. She was even supporting me as a person. That doesn't feel very good as a man. So I had a massive choice to make. Am I going to step up and take control of my life, fix the issues, rewrite the story, and reinvent myself to who I know I can be? And that's exactly what I did. I put in all of the work I could, and this ties into the previous episodes about looking inward and learning to take responsibility for your actions, and you be the one that walks the walk and talks the talk. And I'll tell you this right now, back when I started, I did not think I was going to get through it. I did not think so. I was alone in my head all day. All I ever thought was negative. That's what I knew was negative, and I'd perpetuate the same victim mindset and wonder how the heck I'm going to get through all this. However, I knew in me that I could do way better than I was doing, the life that I was living, how much I was providing, and the value I gave. So I put in the work, and I began the process of change, and I looked inward. And that's where the previous episodes tie into this story. To overcome something like a drug addiction, man, you've got to have a will. And I tell you what, if I got through what I went through, I know you can do whatever it takes. I know you can do it. I'm no different to anyone else. However, I've done it. I've walked through the process of overcoming addiction at a very high degree to a point where it was destroying my life. So, the lessons. Once I learned that nothing's changing. It's getting worse. It's like everything around me, including myself, was decaying. I had to turn inward and begin focusing on the principles from the first 3 episodes. Starting to control my mindset, my thoughts, how I felt, so that I could get myself to a base point. Picture, here's a base point. Let's say there's your standard where you should be, and you're down here. This is where I was. But for me to get from where I was to that standard base point where I was in balance, enough to create, I had to do some work. I had to work on myself. I trained. I used the gym. I didn't have this business when I was going through it all. I had to figure out my own way. Exercise. Meditate. Meditate doesn't have to be woo-woo. Do it because you're going to try and control these impulses within you and these feelings, so you can overcome them yourself and learn to be the leader of your life. Because that's really what it's about. Taking control and becoming the leader and the creator of your world and your life and your circumstances. I wouldn't even speak on this if I didn't know its power, because I've experienced it now. I've gone from literally being jobless and in huge debt at a young age to drug addiction from avoiding and procrastinating heavily and self-sabotaging, to the point of crawling out of these processes all the way to building a business, to having financial freedom. But it all started with this. It started with intercepting these thoughts. So know this, regardless of the addiction and the impulse level, you need to make the decision whether you're going to settle right now, which you shouldn't, and I don't want you to at all. And you've got to try and climb out. You're going to walk the path and go through the hardship, because guess what? If you haven't heard this before, it is the hardest in the beginning. It's like a new person who's never trained before coming to the gym the first time. They're afraid. They've got anxiety. They're worried about opinions of others. Oh, am I going to be judged for how I do a bodyweight squat? They play these things and they write the story in their mind. But then when they show up and finally have the courage and take the leap, they show up and they get through that first session and go, wow, I didn't die. I didn't die from it. I didn't get eaten alive by people's judgment. Now they've got some like glimmer of hope and this confidence that's growing. So they show up to the second, the third, the fourth. Now they're on a roll and they've caught that old story because they pushed through with will, their own will. And that's what I'm trying to say here today. How I got to where I am today was because I kept my mindset strong. There is no accident why I've got stay strong on my top. There is no accident. It's because you literally have to be here at all times, especially in the beginning. Once you're on a roll, that's great. If I have clients who are struggling with certain things, I tell them all the time, it's going to be hard in the beginning. You begin and then you keep going until you've got momentum. Then you're riding the wave. And then every day you've got the skills and you know how to do it. And I'm going to be clapping from a distance because you won't need to rely on anything but yourself after that, because you'll have control. You'll know what it takes to self-correct, get back on the path, and begin the creation process. But remember, you got that base point. If you're down here, get to your base point through training, meditation, intercepting, using the skills that I put in the first 3 episodes to get to your base point. Once you're there and you're feeling balanced, maybe everything's not perfect yet, but you're definitely far from that rock bottom kind of state, and you go back to a balance, you then can create from that point, and you set the new base point up here. Then you'll know when you start to drop below, because you'll feel it. And you'll also have the skill to recognize, shit, I'm not doing certain things in my day-to-day and in my mind and my heart that is meeting that new standard I set for myself. So you keep challenging it and you work on it. You learn to recognize it. Next thing you know, you've got this method. And I still use my method today. But I tell you what, you're always going to want to challenge yourself because that's exciting. You don't want to settle. You have moments of comfort, but you're always trying to push the boundary so that you can improve and evolve as a person, become who you want to be. I'm on my way there. I want you to be on your way there. Not many people have this conversation. Not many people have someone in their life to lean on, to support while they're trying to do these things. People without fathers like myself. People who feel alone in their families. People who can't seem to articulate what they're going through. You have the power to intercept and control how you feel and think, which leads to your actions, which brings you to a base point that you can build and create on. Then you have a method to walk the path towards your goal that you set. That's the beauty of it. I'm living proof of this. That's why I'll scream this, and I've got no doubt in my mind that the method works. And there's much more that I can talk about. However, I think this is a beautiful beginning point to get you going if you feel like you're below that base point. Learn to recognize it. Now you've got an option, a choice, whether you're going to stay below your standard or you're going to meet it and then raise it. I'd recommend the latter because fuck staying down below your standard and feeling shit every day, wondering why things aren't working. Try it. And I promise you, it'll work if you don't quit and you never give up. I know it. I've lived it. I've seen others do it. And now I'm passing it on to you. It's fucking game time. Let's get it. See you on the next episode. Thanks for listening.